What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the top baits of the month of September. I'm looking forward to diving into everything bass fishing in this month. And I do have one little tip in here that I'm going to take one of my buzz baits out of the box, show you how to tune it, and sort of talk a little bit about when I'm throwing that bait and what I'm sort of going to be fishing around when I'm using it. So a lot of different baits I have for this month. Definitely can be one of the tougher months to fish, but let's dive into it. Okay, so it says I teased the buzzbait thing off the rip. I'm gonna go ahead and just dive into the buzzbait side of things. I feel like September is a month of major transition. A lot of times you have your water starting to drop on a lot of these lakes. The fish are starting to change, really move shallower. That year's hatch of gizzard shad or threadfin shad is more abundant in your bodies of water. So there's a lot of bait fish flickering around and stuff like that. So I think a buzzbait's a great bait to cover water. This is the month that I definitely am covering more water than anything else. I'm trying to find the active fish. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. So you're going to see a lot of search baits, a lot of baits that I'm moving around and covering a lot of water to try to find those fish in their active feeding periods. They don't seem to bite all day long. They definitely start to scatter out in September because there is, again, that transition. So a buzzbait to me is one of the best baits to possibly be throwing to covering water, and especially when the fish are shallower. If your lake has a lot of grass, has a lot of rock and wood, stuff like that, I can cover a lot of water and typically find some active fish that are feeding on bait fish, whether it's big gizzards or it's smaller threadfin from earlier that spring. Or little top minnows. So I'm going to show you guys real quick here how to tune a buzzbait, just because I don't really dive into this a lot. This is one of my buzzbaits from Accent. Personally, of course, I've been using this bait for a long time. I think I designed this back in 2016 with my buddies down there at Accent. Small company, actually out of that Gunnersville area, but they actually been fishing with the guys who own the company for several years, one of my best friends. So great bait, a lot of features that really allow for a really good buzzbait. But so if you're looking for top-notch one, check them out. They're a small company and they do a great job. So that being said, let's sort of dive in. This is a brand new buzzbait. I'm going to dive into sort of what I do to this buzzbait and what I would do to any buzzbait if I'm going to be fishing this time of year. So first off, I have a white buzzbait right here. And so in this scenario, I'm going to cut this skirt up quite a bit. This is a good full white skirt. So I'm going to take some scissors. And I'm going to go ahead and cut him all the way to where, basically at the hook. You'll see sort of what I did there. Okay, next thing is your trailer. So I have a mooch minnow right here. A swim bait works fairly well, but a lot of smaller crawl style baits are going to work a little bit better because it's going to help the bait track a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead and throw this guy on there. Little streamline minnow profile. The reason why I prefer cutting that skirt up so tight is because I want my trailer to be shown. Okay, so the trailer on my buzzbait, I want that trailer to have a little bit more profile there. So you can sort of see, if I had that skirt just going all the way down, it would overpower the trailer, and that's something that I really don't want. So this is a perfect, shad imitator in this scenario. Now, this buzzbait right here, I made 2 casts that I'm like, man, it needs a little bit of a tune. Let me see here. Actually, we're at a little mooch minnow actually works pretty good on it. Okay, so it needs a little bit of a tune in order to get him right. Now, these particular buzzbaits, the rivet is already smashed or already like locked in, and so crimped on the shank, so you don't have to worry about that moving. They also sand the rivet to where it allows for it to have more sound. But the one thing I am going to do is I'm going to take my pair of pliers and I'm going to actually bend this sort of, I'll show you guys in close up here in a second. Bend my top, the bottom part of that blade up to right. Basically, you would think like you want to flatten it out to where it would rotate and it would hit harder, or if it was flatter, you want more surface, but you actually want to bend that. If it's like a little deal, like a little flat part of the blade where the wire goes through, you want to bend that up to where it has more of a harder hitting surface. So then I did that just a little, not all the way up, but just enough. So now what I'll do is I burn my buzzbait about 10 times. So take it out on your lake before you even cast, burn 1, I'm just gonna say 3 times right now, but the more you burn it, you're basically making sure that metal to metal contact. One more time. There you go. There you go. A lot better. And I might even tweak him up a little bit more. Yeah, now he's right. Okay. So I'm waiting to hear that chirp in that bait. I want to hear that squeal. In this bait right here, I have a smaller, the one I would recommend is a smaller blade overall. So smaller blade overall, and in your buzz baits, this is the finesse one, but regardless of what it is, I like a big blade a lot of the times, especially when I'm out on grass flats, but because the shad are smaller this time of year, smaller blade. That's just a quick tip on just being able to tune your buzz bait. And it's just a bait that just, again, anybody could throw it. You cast it out there, you reel it in, you can fish around wood. It doesn't have treble hooks, so single hook, good hookup ratio. The one that I do see a lot of anglers mess up on throwing a buzzbait is they set the hook quite a bit, or set the hook really hard. And so like a lot of times you have to let that fish have it. I know it's hard, you're just sort of reeling them out there. Koosh! Delayed hook set is really key. Now I throw 40-pound braid on my buzzbait, but if you have a problem with setting the hook too early, you might decide to go to monofilament. Like a 20-pound mono might help you actually your hookup ratio on your topwaters. So, or you might need a little bit of a softer rod on some of your topwaters. So you sort of got to figure that out, and it's really trial and error with every single angler. So don't think like, okay, hey, like I even miss fish on topwaters all the time, and there's fish that just miss the bait a lot of times as well. I think probably 50% of the bass that we have bought a topwater, like whether it's with a buzz bait or a popper or like a walking bait, a lot of times we set the hook a little early, and those fish might not even got it anyway. But the other 50% it's on the angler, so we need to probably be a little bit careful in setting the hook and taking our time. And setups are very, very key in figuring out exactly what I'm going to be doing. The 7.0 medium heavy Signature Series rod, these are the ones that are in Academy. They're also a lot of duck and fishing retailers. But this rod right here is just really one of my favorite all-around rods for just being able to put something on there and go fishing. And it does a really good job with multiple different baits. And 7.0 seems to be about a perfect versatile rod. Now, as far as where am I going to be throwing this buzzbait, we're picking a new lake this week. Let me see what lake I shows. Lake Limestone. So for my Texas folks out there, I decided to pick Lake Limestone. I've never been there before. So do not take this. I don't know if this could all be grass. I don't know exactly. I'm just envisioning what this lake looks like. I'm literally looking at a map, and I'm giving you my opinion of where I would be focusing on this body of water. So let's go into Lake Limestone, look a little bit. September, of course, you got a couple main tributaries. You got the back of this creek arm right here. I'm looking to sort of see where I would throw that buzzbait at. To me, I can't see if there's any docks in this place right now, but I would think it has quite a few residential areas. If there's docks on this body of water, I'm definitely going to be fishing the back sides of the docks, the buzzbait. I'm definitely going to be fishing some of these tighter banks, and either where these contours get a little tighter, and some of these little tighter banks in these pockets. And then what I mean by that is maybe not necessarily that particular deal where it's really tight, where it's like a maybe like a rock bank. I might fish down through there, but I'll actually start, maybe in the mouth of here and go all the way in this pocket, all the way around, all the way sort of through all these pockets with that buzzbait and cover water to sort of get a vibe on what the fish are doing. And what I mean by that is, what are the shallow fish doing? So I could go into a pocket and put that or a little creek arm like that and put my trolling motor on high and cover all the water and be able to see, if I get a bite here on this point, and then I go down through here a little bit and I get another bite right there on that little point, now I'm starting to develop a pattern of where some of these fish are setting up during this time of day, and I could sort of run around the lake and sort of find more stuff like that. So a lot of times I'm picking a smaller pocket, maybe not this whole creek arm like this guy right here, but a smaller creek arm. Yeah, it's big, it's still big, and I might even go into a smaller one, but I want something that has irregularities. You see in this pocket right here particularly, it has a lot of little pockets, has a little, like, has some depth in there, has a flat in the back, but there's a lot of irregularities in the pocket to give me an idea of what's going on. Now, if I go into a pocket more like rounded, like this one right here, it's pretty straightforward. You go in, you go out. There's two little bellies right here on the left and the right, and that's what you got. So this one's a little bit more to him, and it gives me, I feel like there's a good chance there'll be some bass sitting around this area. Okay, so buzz bait, just covering water, really anywhere you can't go wrong. Just chuck him around, catch some fish. Next up, bait number 2 is gonna be a big bait. For my big bait fishermen out there, I'm gonna pick up a glide bait. And I have 2 glide baits right here. And so for my friends that love custom glide baits, I got one I'm gonna talk about a little bit, and then I have one that I'm gonna talk about that I feel like they're both different. They both have their times and their places. Both really, I have probably about 6 or 7 glide baits, maybe 6 or 7 glide baits right now that are in my rotation of baits that I throw. This one right here is a DS Customs, Donald from DS Customs. I think this is like their 6-inch, 7-inch. He's pretty small. I put a little wire on him, but I've caught some pretty nice fish on this bait. It's a good bait. It's a choppier bait, so when you hear chopping a glide bait, he's just not gonna go like you think glide baits. You're twitching him, or you're snapping him or twitching him, and he's going back and forth. So like when you hear choppy, means like it's cutting quicker than maybe like more traditional glide baits. So this bait literally glides left, glides right, glides. He stays a little bit more. He doesn't glide farther, a far glide. And so it's a really good, like a choppier glide bait a lot of times around cover. Like when I'm around like wood and laydowns, or like in this pocket right here behind us, I can cover water a little bit more a little faster and be a little more efficient. The smaller glides to me generate a lot more bites. It's just typical, like the smaller baits. But I don't really like to go any smaller than maybe this guy right here. Maybe this is like I think it's a 7-inch. I believe it has a 9 and a 7. And I'll try to remember that exactly. But he's a 9 and 7, I'm pretty sure. Might be a 6, but this thing it's good. It's a really good bait. It works well. It has a good, like the custom glides, it has that good squeaky sound to him. Which I think adds something to that. Now, as far as like how I work this bait, pretty simple, same thing. I like keeping him up in the water column. I might twitch him around, but I put a little weight on him so I could cover water faster. And the cool thing about a glide bait is this. A buzz bait, say they don't want to come up on a buzz bait. The cool thing about a glide bait is I can throw a glide bait around, and I can go down that same exact pocket like I talked about in the buzz bait, and I could find out where some of those fish are setting as well. A glide bait's a great search bait to find out where the fish are actually set up on, whether it's on the backside of a dock or whether it's down just a regular bank. You're gonna get fish to follow it. It's definitely more of like the musky side of bass fishing, if you will. You're gonna get a lot of follows. You're not gonna get a lot to commit in a day. But there are ways to generate more bites on a glide bait, so don't be discouraged. Again, smaller glide bait like this guy right here, you're gonna generate a few more bites. And that one that's choppier, I do like this bait a lot. It's a good bait. I've caught some nice fish on it. And it's something in the fall, or the start of the fall, I really like a glide bait because it just, they're scattered out and you can call them from a long distance away. So I can pull them a little bit further where, like, when they're right next to this log, if I cast the edge of a log, I don't have to make the perfect cast to draw that fish away to try to come out there and look at this bait. So DS Customs. Now, as far as my glide bait rod, I really like my 7.7 heavy. This is a Select Series rod. This is not like my favorite flipping rod. This is more of a softer 7.7 heavy. It's not like a real heavier action. But it's a really good glide bait, like mag draft rod, and I like that for a lot for it. It has enough softness to him where he loads up really well, which is really important when you're talking about a glide bait. So next on the glide baits would be the old school Arashi glide. Now, sort of different than the first glide where he's going to be a choppier glide. This one's more of your traditional glide, your longer glides and sweeps. I can really make, as I kick this bait, and what I mean by that is as I kick it, like, as I kick him off of my quarter turns, I can make that bait glide a lot further, which a lot of times is the action those fish really want. So I'm really big on a longer drawn out glide, more on flatter areas that these fish are setting up on. So grass flats, one, great for grass flats, great for searching out there on open water, stump rows and places out deeper where I'm able to 4 or 5 feet, 3 to 5 feet, twitch. I feel like there's times when that longer glide gives those fish a little bit more time to react and bite that bait. I've caught several 7, 8, 9 pound bass on their Arashi glide. It's just a good bait. And you've seen, Carl Jockinson throw it. Brandon Palnick originally designed it. But it has rotating hooks, which is really important. I will bump up my size of my hook sometimes, but really playing around with a glide bait fishing in general is a tricky son of a gun. It's not always the easiest to figure out. So picking up a few that you have confidence in is really important. That's why I added 2 to this sort of subject, because to me, these are both baits I have confidence in. And they both are different. It's almost like uh-oh. Wife's calling, hold on. Listen, when the boss calls, you gotta pick up. We all know that, right? I mean, that is what it is. So back to the glide bait aspect of this, longer glides, shorter glides. To me, having both of those is sort of like a square bill versus I don't know if it would be like that. It would be like a subtle walking bait versus like a pencil popper walking bait. Both of them have their times and places, and you sort of just got to figure out the day and what you're sort of trying to fish with and what you're trying to do with the baits, but they both have their time and place. I've caught big ones around cover with the Arashi glide. I've caught big ones offshore off the bank with the DS Custom. So they both work in those scenarios, but I like this bait better for a search bait when I'm casting and making longer casts on specifically grass flats. Okay, so quickly showing you guys where we're gonna look at right here. Let's just go, because I want a little bit cleaner water. And I think another thing that people get sort of caught up with on glide bait fishing in general is you have to have really clear water. You don't. Okay, clear water does help them visually see the bait a little bit further, but right now we're on Chickamauga, and this water is probably 2 foot of visibility right now. Great water for glide baiting. Still really good. Even a foot of visibility can be just fine for glide baiting. I mean, you see that. I'm not a glide bait expert by no means. I've caught more fish in the glide bait in the last 4 or 5 years, probably 3 years, than I have my whole life. So I've sort of just got into it. So I'm just sort of passing along some of the knowledge that I've learned. I'm sure there's several of you on here right now that are watching that literally know 10 times more than I know about glide bait fishing. But at least bring up sort of some of the things that I like and work for me. Going up the lake sort of a little bit and sort of thinking about, I do want a little bit cleaner water, so I'm probably going to stay on the lower half of this lake. So typical points. So I might end up glide baiting. So this is a great little bar right here. If there's any stumps or anything out there for those fish to set up on, I might throw that Arashi out here on this bar. So starting out here in 8 feet of water, getting on the edge of this guy, probably on this inside because there's a steeper edge right there. Casting up, letting that bait sort of go down a little bit and gliding from this point on the point all the way up to towards these island into that island. That's a really good area where I'm talking about, hey, if there's grass on that flat or there's stumps, that's a really good representation of what I would be looking for throwing that Arashi glide, trying to call those fish up from deeper water. And you have some really big opportunities to catch some really big fish that way. Now, as far as, again, sort of going to the DS Custom, the choppier stuff, it might be more of the in the pockets, around the corners, any lay downs, docks, more cover related is where I'm going to throw that bait. So sort of sliding into this pocket over here on the left, I'm assuming it's a little steeper right there. So a lot of these places right here is where I probably would start and go and throw that bait around up shallower. Sort of the bank like we have that right here is a little rocky bank. There's some wood over here you guys can't quite see. That's the kind of stuff that I'm going to throw that DS Custom. So that is number 2 on the list. We got a buzz bait and glide bait fishing already. So I mean, listen, if it's anything, those 2 baits right there are a lot of fun to throw, and and you can catch some nice ones, you know, utilizing those baits for sure. Next on the list is for my thread fin eaters. And what I mean by that is my small, one thing that I feel like overall, especially in September, is those fish really start to get on smaller bait. And you'll see, you know what I'm talking about. I actually wanted to see the spinner bait. Sucker, ooh, he stays down. So the next bait that I have is a super finesse spinner bait. This one right here is the Subtle Series accent spinner bait. It's got a little money sign on it. This is a 1/2 ounce version. So 1/2 ounce, super small profile. You guys sort of see him right there. Super small profile. One of the blades right here, this is a double willow. Double willow, this is it's a 4 on the spinnerbait blade right there. I don't know what that one is, but it's a fluted blade. So a fluted blade, you'll see it basically gives a little bit more flash. It doesn't have as much vibration, and it gives more flash. So it's a really good bait to imitate smaller bait fish because you don't have the thump necessarily of like a normal flatter willow leaf. You'd have more flash. It sort of disrupts that vibration where it allows it to have more flash out there. So really something that I would, like when I'm trying to imitate more or smaller bait fish or less, wanting a little bit more subtle, hint, hint, Subtle Series, that is definitely something that I like, that fluted blade. It also, yeah, like I said, it also sort of breaks up the flash where it looks like more bait fish than just one blade of just the rotation of that blade. Now, for me, a spinnerbait is sort of a lost art. You know, you hear a little bit about a chatterbait. You hear quite a bit about chatterbait. You hear a lot about swim baits and all this other stuff. But a spinnerbait's a bait that it just gets bites. And now, listen, if you're in Oklahoma, you're probably like, Jay, listen, like half the tournaments in Oklahoma are won on spinnerbait. I understand, I get it. Like, you know, there's big Colorado spinnerbaits, and there's so many nuances within the spinnerbait, but it does get bites, and there's something about that rotation blade. And I think it's making, to be honest with you, it's this biggest sleeper bait day in and day out. If you can figure out how to utilize a spinnerbait in your fishing, it's probably the most slept on technique in tournament bass fishing right now. So if you can sort of bring some of this stuff back, that's why I always am thinking about, hey, what is sort of being slept on in the sport? Let me sort of pick up something that I feel like not all the fish are seeing, and a spinnerbait is one of those things. Now, if you have a little bit more stained water in your body of water, you know, stained water in that lake or that river system, I might not go with a double willow. I might go with something like I said right here, where it's like more of like a Colorado and a turtleback. He's gonna have more thump, still small profile. I can still get him down there a little bit, but I think it's really cool to have a 1/2 ounce in a small finesse spinnerbait. I can keep him down on the flats. Now, if I'm gonna fish shallower, you know, I might go to like a 3/8 or a quarter, something a little bit, but this has more lift than this guy does, so I can fish this guy a little bit deeper on a grass flat, where this guy might be better around some steeper laydowns, or maybe even like a stained water, like little bluff wall, where I'm trying to keep that bait down there a little bit and still have a little bit more thump. I might throw this one instead. So I still am pretty big on a trailer. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab another mooch minnow. You can throw a swim bait on the back of him. I just like a trailer. You guys know me by now. If you don't, in this first video you've watched, I'm big on the trailer aspects of spinner baits and buzz baits for the most part. But this guy right here, I might even cut him up a little bit. But he's pretty small still. He's still pretty small. It sort of matches him pretty well. Actually, it looks really good. I might have to go make a few casts on him here in a second, guys. I'm gonna catch a couple right here. So yeah, that's like a really pretty little combo, and you don't have to make it too all. It doesn't have to be perfect, but at the end of the day, smaller profile swim bait in the back, or this little small, like a little little fluke style, or like, you know, when the mooch minnow comes out for everybody. It's still not out yet, so I apologize on that, but it's going to be out here later around. I think it comes out around October, November for the first bit of it. Oh my gosh, it looks so freaking good, dude. Look at that. Oh my gosh. I'm not throwing the mooch minnow on the back of a spinnerbait, on a small spinnerbait yet. All I'm gonna tell you is it's gonna be a good one. And you can hold up. There was one that, it's 90% in cigar. That's why it's bad for me to get on the water, guys, and do this, because I'm like, I see a squirrel, it's like squirrel. Boom, one blows up or something like that. We have caught one on it. We caught one on top baits of the month cranking. That was crazy. So spinnerbait, subtle spinnerbait. I'll try to drop a link to Accent's website below. So if you guys are big in supporting small businesses like those guys, make sure to check them out. They're a really good company, and they make some great products. Okay, next up on the list, I'm gonna have to pick up, sort of jumping. Oh, hold up. Let me back up. On the subtle spinnerbait side of things, and where I'm going to be throwing this bait a little bit more, it's going to be, again, I'll show you sort of like, to me, backs of the creeks are going to be great because the shad, you hear like the shad moving the backs of the creeks in the fall, which I don't think that's necessarily true. I think it's just more so that you're seeing the big influx of the smaller profile bait fish in the backs of some of these creeks, because a lot of the shad spawn. It's almost like a lot of the shad spawn happened, early, and they just sort of like move back. Some of them, like, maybe it is plankton. Sometimes, I mean, I'm not going to say it couldn't be possible, but I think there's a lot of shad everywhere in the creeks. The main lake, you sort of figure it out. Backs of the creeks, to me, though, in the flats is a great place to throw that spinnerbait, exactly what I was saying. Great place to throw the spinnerbait. Even the points, and some of these points, if there is grass on those places, that's the place that I'll throw that spinnerbait at. Laydowns, steeper banks. It's just really shallow water cover. This is not really as much of a representation of where to throw it. It's just you gotta sort of figure out and sort of play it on your own body of water to figure out what's the best to generate that bite. Like this time of year, I want to show you guys the CMAP side of things, and I want to show you like where to fish, but this is one of those things is trial and error and figuring out your own body of water. It might be the main lake might be best for you, or it might be the back of the creek, or halfway back in the creek. Fundamentally, these are baits that I cover a lot of water with, and I'm going to give you a little bit of an idea of where to start and then sort of go from there. But yeah, creeks, I'm good with that. Even like a smaller offshoot pocket like this guy over here to the left, that might be a better move than all in the back. The water might be too dirty back there. Maybe this little offshoot pocket, maybe some laydowns, a little, or a couple like deadhead logs in the middle. Throw that spinnerbait by him, he's good to go. So that being said, gave you a little bit of an understanding of where to throw that spinnerbait right there. Let's sort of jump into a couple more baits. We have 3 more baits. One thing that I have to sort of bring up that I haven't talked a bunch about is a swim bait. I think that I also think that's a sleeper bait. A swim bait and a spinner bait are the 2 baits that I feel like have been, hold up. So the next in the lineup would be a 3-inch mare. Small finesse swim baiting is something that this time of year, and really from here on out, I'm gonna have a small swim bait tied on. 3/16 1/4-ounce jig head. This is green shad, one of my favorite colors in the Crush City lineup, but natural shad colors. This is a really good search bait as well. Fishing out there on these flats, fishing around points, fishing on rocky banks, you can just cast a swim bait out and reel it in and generate bites. And that's what I think sometimes we forget about. I do, as I've been sort of bad about, not say bad about that, but I just feel like you forget on it a little bit about it because a freeloader is just dominated so much, and there's like a minnow profile catches so many fish. But a swim bait is still probably the best day in and day out for your average fisherman to go out there and cast down a bank or fish, whether you're up north for smallmouth, down south for spotted bass, or largemouth fishing on Chickamauga. This bait gets bites, and smaller profile swim baits generate more bites than probably about any profile this time of year. So if I had one bait to choose from for this month, I'm going to pick up this 3-inch swim bait, call it good. I'm going to be able to generate a few bites on my body of water. Shallow water, deeper water. Even with a 1/4-ounce head, I can fish in 20 foot of water. And a 1/4-ounce head, I can fish them in 2 feet of water. Very versatile, easy going. I would recommend throwing a spinning rod, 7/0 medium action. I like braided fluorocarbon. There's a lot of anglers that still like that fluorocarbon aspect or a monofilament, but braided fluoro, smaller braid, 8-pound braid is what I recommend. But this is definitely on my list of baits you cannot leave home without in September, period. End of story. Now, that being said, I will also say this. All right, so I'm going to transition over to the freeloader in the same breath. So a freeloader is something that I'm going to have on as well in the month of September, all the way through pretty much now. Like, and they just came back in stock. They've been super hard to get. A lot of them are back in stock at Academy, so make sure to check them out. Gizzard shad, green shad, of course, all those colors are phenomenal for this time of year. The one thing you're going to have a difference of, though, swim baiting, cast and reel. You're gonna be able to cover a lot more water with a swim bait. So I'll still use a swim bait, a 4-inch or 3-inch swim bait on a spin rod, or a 4-inch swim bait on a bait caster this time of year, covering water. And then I'll switch over and maybe find a group of fish on a swim bait and throw a freeloader, especially for my friends that do not have like a forward-facing sonar or electronics. Then I might switch over to a freeloader and cast out there, because this bait is staying in the strike zone more. You're way more efficient if they're gonna buy a swim bait to cover water and find active fish with a swim bait. But if the fish are a little inactive and you find a group, or you catch one fish on a swim bait, and you feel like there's more fish there, that's when I pick up that freeloader. Because as you cast the freeloader out there, I'm gonna cast out there, let it hit the bottom, and I'm shaking it. It stays in the strike zone longer. So if those fish are a little bit more fickle, or they want a little slower presentation, a lot of times I can sort of coax those fish into biting a little bit easier on that freeloader than I can with a cast and retrieve with a swim bait. So if that makes any sense to you, that's really where I've felt like a 1-2 punch for my conventional anglers out there with a freeloader, allowing that bait to rock, really does generate a lot of bites, regardless if you can see your bait or not with your electronics. Is something that you want to have on the rod for this time of year. And I'm going to sort of bring this one out there a little bit more. Where am I going to be fishing this? I still believe there's still bass offshore in the month of September, but you're going to look for like places like the tip of this point right here, the tip of that bar right there. These shallower places, the 6 to 8 feet of water, is the areas I'm going to focus on. And for my friends that are actually fishing where like you have the electronics and forward-facing sonar, you know, I'm going to be able to utilize some of that time to go sort of somewhere in these drains. In the middle of these drains like here, some of these places like that, maybe off the tips of these points, looking for bait balls and places I can throw that swim bait or the freeloader to generate those fish that are still suspending, because this is sort of the time of year they'll start to suspend again. So remembering that is something to be important if you're out there on the body of water looking for that. Anywhere the mouths of these creeks, even out here in the middle of this guy, he's a little bit deeper, that might be good to go. So that is for sure. And even like, you know, schools of fish that are on the bottom, these foundations like this is like a place I would check on. It looks like a foundation with a road bed right there, submerged road. That'd be a great little corner, and not halfway back in the creek, that I'm gonna check on. Simple, easy, but you could throw a freeloader right there. Okay, last but not least, you gotta have something for a bottom bouncing bait, and a shaky head is one of those baits I would recommend for this time of year, as well as sort of a light flipping rig. And what I mean by that is, this is the janitor worm. It's more of like a trick worm style profile bait. Pitching that in like a 3/0 worm hook, 1/4 ounce weight, and being able to pitch that around shallow cover generates bites. It's not a 10-inch worm. I'm really not throwing a 10-inch worm as much in the month of September, but this time of year, that smaller profile little worm, I mean, even being in Indiana and even down here south in Tennessee, it's just a bait that, like, if there's one flipping bait, that streamlined worm, guys, there's some really good looking laydowns right here, and I just wanted to see if I can catch one real quick here, because I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'd like to dang catch one on that worm. Hold on, let me make one more throw. So one more throw, I promise. I promise I'm done after this. Pan over there to show them that laydown real quick here. You guys got to see this. This laydown's beautiful. There's no way. I just got hung up. All right, we're back. A janitor style worm, which is not going to be available until later. Green pumpkin, of course, green pumpkin magic. But there's a lot of different stick worms like that. And that bait goes and slithers through cover a little bit better than maybe like a brush hog, bronco bug, creature bait style profile. So if you're fishing around shallow stuff like this, I might have to go try to catch a fish off this laydown because I'm a little irritated I didn't. It might be a good option to pick up something a smaller profile like this guy right here. And yeah, that's the rundown. 7.3 medium, 7.3 heavy, probably pitching around on some of that stuff, fishing around boat docks, fishing around shallow wood, shallow cover. If the fish won't bite a spinnerbait, they won't bite a buzzbait, pick up that worm, fish shallow cover, backs of creeks, fish on some transition areas. This is a time of year that it is tough bass fishing. Don't be discouraged. You're not going to generate, more than likely, it's not going to be the time you're going to generate a lot of bites. But there are still some really big fish to be caught. Now, for my friends up north, it's time to reel them in. September's a good month up north. It's a very good month up north. So, not necessarily I feel bad because I almost need to do like a top baits of the month for my friends like Minnesota, New York, like Pennsylvania, and then like the rest of the country down here. So I apologize because it's a different world up there. It is, it's a different world. But hope you guys appreciate you guys following along. Hope you guys enjoy this video. Drop a comment below. Let me know what you want to see next on the channel. We're gonna have some fun this fall. I have several things that we're gonna be talking about, and hopefully jumping back into a little bit more in-depth masterclass content. So if you enjoy this kind of content and you want a little bit more in-depth content, masterclass content should be coming up here later this fall.